Okay, let's unpack this. For the longest time, the whole conversation around cybersecurity felt like it belonged, I don't know, exclusively in the server room.
Right, it was very technical.
Totally. It was all about code and network perimeters and this relentless technical battle between good hackers and bad ones. But that definition, it's just hopelessly outdated now.
It really is. Technology has woven itself into everything.
Exactly, into every core system of human life. I mean, from how we access medicine to how elections are run. So protecting these digital systems is no longer just a technical engineering problem.
It's become something much bigger.
It's become a foundational issue of morality, of human rights, and even social justice.
Yeah.
The decisions made inside IT departments, they now have these profound societal consequences.
The ripple effects are huge.
Yeah. The digital systems we all rely on are only as secure and, as ethical as the human choices governing their design and deployment. So our mission today is a true deep dive into this ethical transformation. We're analyzing a whole stack of sources that reveal the ethical bedrock.
The foundations.
Exactly. The laws and frameworks that establish universal standards. And then there are the real-world ethical minefields that professionals walk every single day.
Like penetration testing, AI deployment.
Right. And the astonishing, just unavoidable role of human nature, which covers everything from a simple, exhausted error to, high-stakes crisis management.
And that's the core tension, isn't it?
It is. The essential tension running through all of this, the core subject of our deep dive, is the absolute link between data privacy, public trust, and security. We are finding that you fundamentally cannot violate privacy without immediately threatening security.
And in doing so, breaching ethical and legal standards, that intertwining is exactly what makes this topic so immediate and, frankly, so complex.
It's urgent.
It is. The sources confirm that data privacy protection is now critical because of the sheer ubiquity of technology. We are all always online.
All the time.
And it's led to the rise of what we call socio-techno risk.
Can you break that down for us? What is socio-techno risk?
Sure. It's the risk that originates not just from the hardware or the software, but from the convergence of technology and human users. So we're talking about everything from massive system failures and identity theft all the way up to sophisticated cyber terrorism targeting nations.
Wow.
And this environment, it forces organizations to shift drastically. They have to move beyond just, checking boxes for legal compliance.
The bare minimum.
Exactly, the minimum standard. They have to aim for genuine ethical consistency in every single decision they make, because failure is now measured in human cost, not just system downtime.
Before we really get into the conflicts, let's just anchor ourselves in a clean definition of what we actually mean when we say data privacy.
That's essential. So data privacy is a really comprehensive concept. It's about the access, use, and collection of any personal data.
Okay.
And crucially, it also encompasses the data subject's legal and, I'd argue, moral right to inspect, to update, or to correct that data.
So you have control.
You have control. It also includes their right to freedom from unauthorized access and protection against the inappropriate use of that data, even by the entity that collected it. At its core, it's about autonomy over one's digital self.
And when organizations fail to uphold that autonomy, the consequences are enormous. It's not just a technical fine they have to worry about, is it?
Oh, far from it. We often fixate on the hard costs.
Right.
The financial penalties from regulators like the EU's GDPR, the compensation payments in class action lawsuits, the cost of remediation.
The things you can put a number on.
Exactly.
Right.
But the soft costs are often more devastating and far-reaching. We're talking about catastrophic reputational damage.
And the loss of trust.
The profound, long-lasting loss of client trust. I mean, if people cannot trust you implicitly with their most sensitive digital information, especially in sectors like finance or healthcare, your entire business model is fundamentally compromised.
So trust is the new currency.
Trust is the digital currency of the 21st century, without a doubt.
And if trust is the currency, then the first challenge we have to confront is this common belief that we have to sacrifice privacy to buy security. So let's dive into that core conflict. When you look at traditional, old school cybersecurity thinking, the conversation often starts from this misconception that security and privacy are enemies.
A zero-sum game.
A classic zero-sum game. The idea is simple, right? The more logs you generate, the more monitoring you implement, the more surveillance you enact to stop threats. Well, the more personal privacy you must inherently sacrifice.
And our sources show this perception is alarmingly widespread, particularly among sort of legacy security teams.
How widespread are we talking?
In one major study, a staggering 67% of traditional security professionals surveyed actually approached new privacy requirements, like GDPR's rules for data minimization, as obstacles to security.
Obstacles, not partners.
Not complementary objectives. They saw it as something getting in their way.
So if the majority of the people tasked with defending our systems start with the idea that privacy is just bureaucratic noise slowing them down, you've already created a massive cultural barrier to compliance.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating here is that the empirical evidence strongly refutes this zero-sum view. This perception isn't just theoretically flawed, it's operationally dangerous.
How so?
Because it creates things like shadow IT and internal resistance. When organizations implement these really heavy-handed security measures without adequately considering user privacy.
Like intrusive monitoring tools that feel punitive?
Precisely. They inadvertently undermine the very security they're trying to protect. The evidence shows that these organizations experience 47% higher rates of user resistance and workarounds.
So employees just find ways around it.
They find ways around invasive logging, creating new, often hidden vulnerabilities, and this leads to a 32% higher rate of security policy violations. People simply refuse to comply with what they see as unnecessarily intrusive controls because, they feel disrespected.
So trying to achieve maximum security by ignoring the moral and human aspect of privacy actually makes the organization dramatically less secure. That's the real operational risk here.
It creates that vicious cycle. And to break it, the sources emphasize two theoretical frameworks that can guide us toward complementarity. The first is something called the proportionality principle.
Okay, proportionality.
Proportionality suggests that security measures must be precisely calibrated to actual defined threat levels. They must be designed specifically to minimize unnecessary privacy intrusion.
So the key question is always, what?
The key question is always, is this measure necessary? And is it the least intrusive measure available to achieve the desired security outcome? For example, you could log all user activity, or you could only log activity near the highly critical, highly sensitive financial data.
And an ethical organization chooses the second option.
Right, they prioritize data minimization.
And the second framework, which is maybe even more critical when you're dealing with complex data environments, is contextual integrity.
Yes, the contextual integrity framework, which was developed by Helen Nissenbaum. This framework fundamentally refutes the idea of privacy as absolute secrecy.
So it's not all or nothing?
No. Instead, it defines privacy as the assurance of appropriate information flows that are determined by specific, context-specific norms.
Can you give us an example of how that works in practice?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Think about an employee's network monitoring. In the context of, say, a highly sensitive military contractor, constant deep packet inspection might be an established norm of information flow.
Right, it's expected.
It's expected. So in that context, while it is still surveillance, it might not be a privacy violation if that norm is clearly communicated. However, if you apply that exact same level of monitoring to a university library employee,
that's a massive privacy violation.
A massive violation, because the norms of the academic context just don't allow for that level of employer oversight. And traditional security frameworks, our sources say, fail to acknowledge this nuance in 82% of cases. They just treat all data monitoring as equally justified if it serves a technical security purpose.
That makes perfect sense. It's not just what data is gathered, but why it's gathered and under what expectations it was created. So how does adopting these complementary views translate into real-world business improvement?
The change is stark. Organizations that explicitly incorporate the proportionality principle and contextual integrity report a 41% higher rate of user compliance.
Wow.
People are just dramatically more willing to adhere to rules they see as reasonable and respectful of their dignity. And on top of that, they see 28% fewer security incidents related to intentional violations.
And we also have technological solutions, which is really encouraging.
Absolutely. We have what are called privacy-enhancing technologies, or PTTs. This is a category of tech that minimizes personal data processing while still allowing for necessary analysis or security functions.
Like zero-knowledge proofs?
Yes, or homomorphic encryption.
Okay, homomorphic encryption sounds highly technical, but what does it actually do?
In plain language, it allows you to perform computations, like running an analytics model or checking security parameters on data that is still encrypted.
So the server processing the data never actually sees the clear text?
Never. And studies show that PTs can achieve up to 89% of security objectives while providing robust privacy guarantees. This technological advancement really means the security versus privacy conflict is mostly a fallacy rooted in outdated operational thinking.
You know, the journey from viewing privacy as a nuisance to seeing it as a moral necessity is beautifully illustrated by a real-world incident from Asia, the octopus card scandal in Hong Kong back in 2010.
A famous case.
Yeah, the octopus card is this ubiquitous electronic wallet used by millions for daily public transport and retail. In 2010, the company was revealed to have sold significant amounts of customer loyalty data.
We're talking names, contact details, purchase habits.
Everything. They sold it to third-party insurance companies for targeted direct marketing.
And the core issue wasn't the data itself, it was the consent.
Right. Exactly. They technically informed customers through this obscure clause buried deep within a long, complex privacy policy statement. But the public and the subsequent Privacy Commission investigation did not see that as meaningful consent.
People felt they'd been tricked.
Totally. The public outcry was massive, forcing a major investigation and ultimately leading to the CEO's resignation. And here's the key ethical takeaway. The company technically denied breaking the letter of the law at the time.
But they couldn't deny the ethical failure.
They were absolutely forced to accept that their actions fell short of customer expectations and the public's ethical standard.
The new CEO who took over after the fallout, he perfectly captured the necessary change in organizational standard. He said the bar had been permanently raised.
What was the quote?
He stated, "We need to do not just what is legal, but what is right." That incident wasn't just a legal battle. It was a cultural moment that heightened public awareness of data rights and set a new, higher bar for organizational ethical behavior globally.
That anecdote makes it so clear that we can't just rely on the individual morality of a CEO. Organizations need established, comprehensive ethical guide rails that professionals can actually follow.
Absolutely. To navigate that demanding mandate of doing what is right, professionals and researchers rely on established frameworks that define universal ethical standards, moving beyond just local compliance. A great place to start is a foundational document from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the Menlo Report.
Okay.
This report is so critical because it adapted the principles of the Belmont Report, which is a landmark document from biomedical ethics, specifically for research involving information and communications technologies, or ICT.
And it kept the three core principles and added a fourth.
Exactly. A crucial fourth to address the unique, distributed nature of the digital age.
Let's walk through those four, because they really do form the blueprint for ethical digital conduct.
So the first is respect for persons. This means participation in any ICT research or penetration testing must be voluntary and must follow from informed consent.
You have to treat individuals as autonomous agents.
Precisely. And respect their right to determine their own best interests and the fate of their data.
And it extends beyond just the person whose systems are being tested, right?
Crucially, yes. It also extends protection to individuals who are not the direct target of the research, but are still potentially impacted by it. For instance, if you're testing the security of a large public platform, you have to consider the privacy and service availability for all users, not just a small group of test subjects.
Respecting people's digital autonomy has to come first.
Always. The second principle is beneficence, the classic ethical mandate to do no harm. This means you must actively maximize probable benefits and minimize foreseeable harms.
And in cybersecurity, those harms are information-centric.
Exactly. Contravening data confidentiality, availability, integrity, or infringing on reputation, psychological well-being, financial, even physical well-being. A professional needs to have a concrete, actionable response plan for all foreseeable harms.
And a contingency plan for the things you don't foresee.
A plan for low probability, high-impact risks like accidental data deletion, absolutely.
That sounds like an ethical tension right there, though. Maximizing benefits often means taking risks, which directly conflicts with minimizing harm.
It absolutely is a tension. The ethical calculus requires a meticulous risk-benefit analysis that has to weigh the severity of potential harm against the likelihood and magnitude of the public benefit.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Testing the defenses of critical national infrastructure might offer a massive public benefit, but the potential for catastrophic harm requires extreme caution and minimization protocols.
Okay, what's third?
Third is justice. This demands the fair distribution of research benefits and burdens. Research must actively avoid arbitrary targeting by proxy. A classic example of injustice in ICT research would be exploiting a specific economically disadvantaged group just because they might use older, less secure technology.
Making them an easier target.
Exactly. Selection of subjects has to be fair, and the burdens like exposure to risk or inconvenience must be allocated equitably across everyone impacted.
And the fourth, the one added for the digital age.
The one added for ICT research, which has become hugely relevant, respect for law and public interest. This requires not just strict legal due diligence, but also proactive transparency in methods and results and accountability for actions.
Why is transparency so explicitly called out there?
Transparency is vital because it galvanizes public trust in ICT research. This principle ensures legal requirements are met, but it also addresses broader obligations relating to reputation and individual well-being that extend beyond the strict letter of the law. It's a mandate for ethical citizenship within the digital ecosystem.
It's impressive how these ethical principles, originally derived from protecting human subjects in medical trials, translate so directly into digital policy. And these ideas aren't just confined to the US, they form the basis for a global consensus.
Indeed, they are universal. We see these same tenets echoed across various regulatory environments in what are called the International Data Privacy Principles, or IDPPs.
Okay.
It's a powerful composite approach. It balances U.S. standards like the FTC Fair Information Practices, highly stringent European standards like GDPR, Asian regulations like the Hong Kong PDPO, and international benchmarks like the OECD Privacy Framework.
And the IDPPs also recognize the fundamental economic reality of the internet. The contractual philosophy of do I dis dos. I love that Latin phrase. It means I give that you may give.
It's the basis of a contract, where there has to be a genuine balance between what is given and what is received.
The quid pro quo.
Correct. When a user accesses a free service like Google Search or a social media platform, the trade-off is that they receive the service in exchange for their data or their attention. The IDPPs mandate that this data for services exchange must be balanced, transparent, and built on meaningful consent. The user has to understand the value of what they're giving up.
That's a massive challenge in practice, though.
Yeah.
How does the average user truly know the value of the data they're exchanging, especially when the service is free?
It's almost impossible, which is why the IDPPs shift the burden of proof and clarity onto the organization. The rules try to force that balance.
So what are some of the key requirements?
They're robust. Organizations must comply with current security standards to protect stored data. They have to implement an easily perceptible and accessible privacy policy, explaining exactly what data is collected, why, how long it's stored, and who it's shared with.
And critically, echoing that proportionality principle, they must not collect data if it's unnecessary or excessive for the stated purpose.
That's right. If they say they need your name for shipping, they shouldn't also be collecting your browsing history unless they have a separate, explicit justification for it.
Data minimization is a core ethical mandate, not just a technical feature. But what happens when global business requires data to cross borders?
This is a major point of contention in ethical governance. Organizations cannot transfer data to countries with inadequate protection standards, countries that don't meet the IDPP benchmarks, unless the customer is fully informed about the risks and explicitly agrees.
So it prevents companies from exporting their ethical responsibility to jurisdictions with laxer rules.
That's the goal. And if the customer is paying for the service, the requirements become even stricter, which makes sense because there's a direct financial transaction involved.
What does that look like?
For paid services, the customer must be informed individually and immediately, ASAP, about any breach that might affect them. Furthermore, the company must require explicit, separate, and individual consent for using or divulging content-related personal data.
Even for internal purposes?
Yes. For example, using customer content for AI training models requires a whole separate box to be checked, not just a line item in a 40-page terms of service agreement.
We can see how this ethical judgment is baked right into the implementation when we look at specific local laws, like the Hong Kong Data Protection Principles, which are themselves based on those international OECD guidelines.
These Hong Kong DPPs perfectly demonstrate how theoretical principles are operationalized. Take DPP-1, data collection. It must be lawful and fair, but not excessive.
But who defines fair and excessive? That sounds inherently subjective.
It is subjective, and that's the point. The determination of fairness and excessiveness is relativistic. It's heavily influenced by society's collective ethical belief at the time. What was acceptable data collection 10 years ago is often deemed excessive today because society's expectations of privacy have evolved.
So organizations have to constantly monitor that ethical baseline.
Constantly. Or consider DPP2, retention. Data should not be kept longer than necessary for the fulfillment of the original purpose. This throws up a significant utilitarian dilemma.
Let's talk about that dilemma. What's the conflict there?
The conflict is between individual protection and organizational interest. Short retention deleting data quickly is protective of the individual. It minimizes the risk of future breaches and misuse.
But long retention might be protective of the organization's interests.
Right, for their commercial or historical interests. Or maybe it's necessary for future legal defense against lawsuits. So which interest takes priority?
And who actually gets to decide where that ethical line is drawn? Is it the legal department, driven by litigation risk, or is it an ethics board, driven by user rights?
It requires a synthesis, but the principles of beneficence and respect for persons mandate that the individual's potential harm should weigh very heavily. The organization must demonstrate clear, justifiable, and necessary reasons for longer retention periods.
So no more hoarding data just because storage is cheap?
It demands careful ethical balancing, enforced by governance. Then there is DPC3, data use. Using data for a purpose unrelated to the original collection requires voluntary and explicit consent. This directly translates to respecting individual free will and choice.
The organization can't just decide a new use is okay.
No, the choice must remain with the individual. And finally, DPP4, security. This principle explicitly states that organizations must balance the resources and effort spent on security against the likely harm that individuals would suffer from a breach.
So it's a mandate for proportional spending.
Exactly. You must weigh the financial cost of security measures against the potential ethical and human cost of failure. You can't claim you couldn't afford security if the data you held was highly sensitive medical records.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we move from the philosophical frameworks, the rules for the ideal digital citizen, to the stark, daily reality of implementation. And the reality is the biggest risk factor isn't complex code, it's human nature itself.
Oh, the data on this is not just compelling, it's unavoidable. And we define human error here not as malicious activity, but as unintentional actions or oversights by employees, often due to simple negligence, distraction, or poor decision-making that end up compromising security.
And the stats are just shocking.
They are. 95% of all successful cybersecurity breaches have some element of human error, misconfiguration, or involvement.
Let's just pause on that 95% number. That means that no matter how much a company spends on AI defense, on firewalls, on multi-factor authentication, if that 5% of pure technical failure is all that's left, the overwhelming majority of their risk is still human.
Precisely. And insider threats, which, critically, include accidental disclosures alongside intentional malice, account for a massive 43% of all breaches.
And the numbers aren't getting better fast enough.
Not really. In a 2024 survey, 68% of breaches were attributed to human factors. And even in highly technical areas, human error dominates. 31% of cloud breaches were attributed to misconfiguration or simple human error in setting up secure access policies.
We build the most technically advanced systems, and then we forget to turn them on correctly.
It's a fundamental problem.
What are the real concrete consequences when an employee makes a simple mistake, like sending an email to the wrong person?
The consequences are now severe and punitive for the employee. A 2022 study found that 21% of employees reported losing their jobs after sending an email with important data to the wrong person.
More than 1 in 5 people who make a common clerical mistake are terminated.
Yeah, and this is a massive jump from just 12% in 2020. It shows a growing intolerance for human failure in data handling.
And the impact on the business.
Equally severe. 29% of companies reported losing a client or customer due to an employee email error. These data send errors sending sensitive personal information to the wrong recipient, accounted for nearly half of human error breaches in certain sectors.
But why does this high-stakes environment lead to more mistakes? We all know we shouldn't click the suspicious link or rush the email, yet we do it consistently.
The reasons are deeply human. They illuminate the core challenges of maintaining high vigilance in a stressful, fast-paced digital world. When employees were surveyed about their mistakes, 51% admitted to making security mistakes when they were tired.
Up from 43% just a few years earlier.
Right. Similarly, 50% felt pressure to send the email quickly, which is a dramatic jump from 34% in 2020.
So fatigue and pressure are the ethical vulnerabilities that threat actors are actively exploiting.
They are the soft targets. And remote work just exacerbates this.
Yeah.
56% of IT leaders believe working from home increases the likelihood of human error breaches.
Wow.
They cite the blending of personal and professional technology and increased distraction. Fatigue, pressure, and distraction are massive ethical challenges that require cultural solutions, not just technical ones.
Okay, if that's passive error, let's shift to the active intentional challenges faced by cybersecurity professionals, the ethical hackers and consultants who are authorized to attack and breach systems on behalf of their clients. They're operating right on the edge of the law.
These professionals operate in a highly charged ethical gray area. Consider the penetration testing dilemmas. Ethical hackers are required to attack systems under incredibly strict constraints that absolutely prohibit harming the system, deleting data, or encroaching on the dignity of those affected.
So they wield enormous authorized power, but they have to grapple with the morality of their methods.
Exactly. One key area of conflict is the client management tension. Doing the right thing for the client organization as a corporate entity versus doing the right thing for the staff, the individual employees who make up that entity.
And using deception, even to expose weakness, risks breaking the internal trust between the company and its people.
It does. Our sources provide a phenomenal, though highly disturbing case example of this tension involving a bank.
Let's hear it.
A major bank commissioned a security firm to evaluate whether employees were adhering to a strict policy forbidding the use of unauthorized USB devices. The bank's internal IP staff, feeling justified by the policy, wanted the security firm to adapt a known piece of banking malware.
They wanted to use actual malware.
Well, just the installation mechanism.
Yeah.
And they wanted to secretly install it on USB sticks that would be accidentally dropped in key common areas.
And if an unsuspecting employee picked up the stick and plugged it into their workstation, what would happen?
The malware would covertly email specific internal spreadsheets from a shared directory back to the security firm, proving the policy violation and identifying the employee. Now, this is a deep ethical minefield. The firm was asked to use criminal tools to catch policy violators.
Let's break down the ethical conflicts there using the Menlo principles we discussed.
Okay, first, the legality is questionable depending on the jurisdiction, even if the exfiltrated data wasn't explicitly personal. Second, there's the morality of employing malware at all. It normalizes malicious tools within the organization.
And most importantly,
It violates respect for persons and the principle of justice. The employees are subjected to covert surveillance and deception. While they may be violating a policy, they're not being treated as autonomous agents. De-anonymizing them via malware is morally ambiguous at best.
and the punishment doesn't fit the crime.
Exactly. The test might have been deemed legal, but it fails the ethical test of respecting human dignity.
So what's another high-stakes dilemma?
A related one is the confidentiality conflict. Professionals like antivirus engineers or ethical hackers handle extremely sensitive, often proprietary, client information. What happens when they discover evidence of serious, non-client-related illegal activity? Say, large-scale tax evasion, or, more gravely, child endangerment during the course of their authorized work.
And they are almost certainly bound by strict NDAs and client confidentiality agreements, which are necessary for the professional relationship to function in the first place.
Exactly. So they must decide between maintaining that client confidentiality, a paramount professional obligation, and the moral or legal obligation to report threats to life or serious crime. This decision is further complicated by complex and often conflicting jurisdictional differences across the globe.
What do the professional codes say?
Professional codes often mandate that life and public safety override confidentiality, but applying that rule in a real-time, ambiguous situation is incredibly difficult.
The complexity of these individual dilemmas, from the email mistake to the pen tester's moral tightrope, tells us we need a robust system of accountability embedded in the organization's structure. A simple paper rulebook just isn't going to cut it.
That's where we turn to governance and structure. Our sources suggest moving beyond simple compliance codes to adopt an operational ethical framework, such as the Hexadimension Code of Conduct.
Okay, what is that?
This structure goes beyond the traditional focus on purely technical, legal, and financial concerns to formally integrate broader social and ethical views into corporate decision-making.
So what are the 6 dimensions?
The framework mandates assessment based on 6 factors, which must all be considered when making a high-stakes decision: legal validity, social desirability, ecological sustainability, ethical acceptability, technical effectiveness, and financial viability.
That sounds excellent on paper, but given the time and budget pressure security teams face, Is there a risk that adding social desirability or ecological sustainability to a security engineer's performance review just dilutes their focus on the core mission of technical effectiveness? Isn't this just adding bureaucracy?
That's a fair challenge, and it's why operationalization is so key. The framework has to be tailored. A functional unit like a security team might legitimately skip a detailed assessment of ecological sustainability if it's not relevant to their direct operations.
But for a different project.
Exactly. For a data center expansion project, ecological sustainability, power consumption, heat dispersion would be absolutely critical and non-negotiable. The goal isn't to add bureaucracy, but to ensure that the security decision doesn't inadvertently violate a core ethical pillar in another area of the business.
So how do organizations truly make this framework operational so it doesn't just sit in a binder on the shelf?
Operationalization requires three mandatory steps. First, clearly identify the relevant factors based on the unit and the operation. Second, you must secure the support of the board and critical functional units, HR, legal, finance, IT, to ensure the supporting infrastructure is in place.
And the third step.
The most important step for true accountability is inclusion in performance metrics. The framework has to be included in annual performance reviews by HR. Employees should be specifically asked to demonstrate that their duties were carried out consistent with data privacy and security policies across those 6 dimensions.
Meaning they have to prove they didn't just meet their technical objectives, but that they didn't break the law, weren't harmful to individuals or society, weren't wasteful of resources, and weren't harming the environment in the process of achieving those objectives.
That's the key. So what? Accountability is enforced and measurable. It ensures that ethical behavior isn't just aspirational, but enforceable, tied directly to job performance and the organization's success. It fundamentally changes the risk calculus for the individual employee.
Now we expand the lens from individual action and professional dilemmas to these global systemic challenges. We need to look at how massive external events or paradigm-shifting technologies like AI force entire systems and society itself to confront profound ethical trade-offs. We should start with the intense pressure cooker of crisis.
The COVID-19 pandemic acted as an incredibly powerful game changer. It radically increased our dependence on the internet almost overnight for work, for school, for information, and it created new vulnerabilities in systems struggling under the load.
And threat actors exploited that.
Masterfully. They used global fear and uncertainty in what one source accurately labeled social engineering at its worst.
This led to the highest volume of sophisticated attacks that cyberspace had ever witnessed.
Absolutely. Phishing campaigns used coronavirus-specific topics, fake CDC donation requests, malicious links disguised as COVID-19 tax relief documents, and emails offering fake drugs pretending to be governmental health organizations. The criminals were targeting vulnerable, confused, scared people seeking immediate information.
Which makes the attacks ethically repugnant. And the most egregious exploitation was aimed at the systems we needed most, healthcare.
That's right. Criminals mercilessly exploited weaknesses in hospitals and healthcare facilities with ransomware, putting lives directly at risk by shutting down electronic patient records and critical systems. The WHO reported a 5-fold increase in cyber attacks during that period.
And this raised the acute ethical dilemma of paying the ransom.
It did. On one hand, paying financially supports organized crime and encourages more attacks, which is an ethical wrong against the common good. On the other hand, administrators felt they had a fiduciary duty to patients to restore life-saving systems quickly, even if it meant paying millions.
The Garmin case comes to mind.
The alleged $10 million payment by Garmin after a ransomware attack in 2020 sparked a fierce media debate over the ethics of supporting organized crime for immediate recovery. It's a classic no-win situation.
The other major ethical flashpoint during the pandemic was the rush to deploy contact tracing technology. That was an immediate high-stakes clash between public health security and individual privacy rights.
Contact tracing apps raised very serious ethical concerns related to massive data collection and potential mass surveillance. Experts worried immensely about mission creep.
Explain that.
Mission creep is the risk that vast amounts of sensitive, potentially identifiable health and location data, useful for flattening the curve today, could later be repurposed by the government or third parties for purposes far beyond the original intent.
Like political surveillance or mandatory tracking.
Exactly. And the sources suggest that this ethical risk had measurable negative consequences for the effectiveness of the public health effort. The lack of clear ethical safeguards and transparency resulted in a critical failure of public trust. According to one major study, 3 in 5 Americans were either unable or, more importantly, unwilling to use the apps.
And because these systems rely on widespread user participation, that lack of trust made the technology essentially useless for its stated purpose.
It did. The conclusion for future crises is clear. Transparency, robust data minimization, and clear sunset clauses stating when data will be deleted must be enacted for user consent to be fully informed and effective.
Beyond the immediate crisis, AI is revolutionizing security, but it's simultaneously introducing profound ethical flaws into the very systems meant to protect us. It's solving old problems of scale and speed while creating new, deeper ethical ones of bias and accountability.
The adoption of AI in security is rapid because the benefits are so clear. 76% of organizations now use AI-based security tools, resulting in a reported 37% reduction in threat detection time.
But speed and efficiency come at an ethical price.
They do, primarily due to the nature of machine learning models. The primary ethical flaw we are seeing is the opacity problem, or the technical black box. 67% of AI security deployments use complex neural networks that analysts describe as functionally opaque.
And what does that mean in practice?
It means when false positives occur, when the system flags an innocent action as malicious, security teams can only explain the specific causal reasons in 43% of cases.
So you have systems making high-stakes determinations, like shutting down access to a critical server or flagging an employee as a threat. But the people running the systems can't articulate why the decision was made. That lack of explicability violates the Menlo principle of accountability.
It leads directly to algorithmic bias, which is perhaps the most serious ethical failing. If the training data is flawed, if it reflects historical societal biases, the system will reproduce and amplify those biases under the guise of technical objectivity.
Do we have examples of that?
The examples are stark. Behavioral monitoring systems designed to detect insider threats flag non-native English speakers as suspicious at rates 4.6 times higher than native speakers, simply because the training data favored native English communication patterns.
Wow.
And in security applications, facial recognition false positive rates were 34.7% for darker-skinned individuals compared to 8.1% for lighter-skinned subjects. These systems are applying social inequities to security decisions.
And this creates a dangerous psychological effect on security teams, a loss of human judgment, and a deference to the machine.
We are seeing evidence of this systemic deference. Security teams override their own intuition and judgment in favor of AI recommendations in 61% of cases where they initially disagree with the system's finding.
Let me get this straight. More than half of professionals tasked with security admit they override their own gut instinct, which might be informed by ethical nuance or contextual knowledge in favor of an automated determination.
Yes, that shows a dangerous trend where human ethical judgment is being displaced by automated process.
The solution proposed in our sources addresses this deference directly and is centered on the ethical need for transparency.
The framework requires explainable security, XAI, a mandate that security professionals must understand and articulate why AI systems make specific security determinations, especially when human rights or critical operations are affected. The field needs to prioritize interpretability and transparency over raw performance metrics to ensure human ethical oversight remains central.
So if cybersecurity touches human rights, governance, and societal fairness, what does this all mean for the modern enterprise? The answer seems to be that cyber risk has become a core component of sustainable business ethics, the ESG agenda.
That's the final crucial connection. Cybersecurity risk is now formally considered a material factor in sustainable business success. We have to examine its role across the three pillars of ESG: governance, environment, and social.
Governance seems like the most direct link.
It is. Cyber risk has significant governance implications, driven by regulations like GDPR and sector-specific rules. Boards of directors are now legally responsible for overseeing cyber risk. Furthermore, accurate ESG data itself, reporting on emissions or diversity, relies entirely on robust cybersecurity to protect that data from manipulation or theft.
So if your governance around cyber is weak, your entire ESG report is suspect.
Essentially, yes.
How does cyber risk connect to the environment pillar? That seems less intuitive.
It's rapidly becoming critical. Climate change mitigation and decarbonization plans rely on massive digital transformation smart grids, automated monitoring systems, remote management of infrastructure. All of these digital solutions create enormous new opportunities for cybercrime.
And cyber attacks can now directly endanger the physical environment.
Exactly. By targeting critical infrastructure, like power plants, oil pipelines, and water processing facilities. They can cause physical damage, leaks, or blackouts that result in environmental harm. There's also a unique ethical balancing act. Implementing robust cyber resilience, like having redundant data centers, can lead to significantly higher use of resources and energy.
Potentially conflicting with sustainability goals, a profound ethical trade-off in the planning phase. And finally, the social pillar.
The social pillar is profoundly affected, as cyber risks directly impact society's well-being. Data protection is essential to prevent identity theft, financial fraud, and the disruption of critical public services like healthcare and emergency response.
And ransomware.
Ransomware attacks cripple operations, damage reputations, and, as we discussed, paying the ransom encourages more crime, further destabilizing societal trust. Ultimately, the social dimension is about trust. Customers are much more likely to do business with companies they trust to protect your information and respect their personal right to access or delete that data.
So a robust, ethical cyber posture is now a key driver of customer loyalty and social license to operate.
Exactly. And it's now mandatory for responsible corporate behavior. Cyber risk is formally recognized as a material sustainability factor by globally recognized standards setters like the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, SASB, and the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI.
Meaning companies have to be transparent about it?
It mandates greater transparency about a company's cyber posture and its resilience strategy to build and sustain stakeholder trust. It's no longer an optional add-on. It's fundamental to proving corporate responsibility in the digital age.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today, moving from defining the ethical principles that should govern digital systems to confronting the stark reality of human error and negligence in daily security, the complexities of professional integrity in gray areas like penetration testing, and finally the systemic risks posed by technologies like AI and the integration of cyber risk into global corporate governance through ESG.
The overarching insight, as we close, is that the path forward requires what we might call ethical wisdom, a mindset that goes far beyond technical fixes and strict legal compliance. Professional codes from organizations like the ACM, ISC2, and the IE serve as vital moral compasses.
Emphasizing public trust, diligence, honesty.
And protecting the common good.
Oh.
This wisdom needs to be integrated not just into annual online training modules, but into organizational documents, the code of conduct, the incident response policy, and even professional licensing structures.
Because at the end of the day,
effective cybersecurity cannot exist without ethical decision-making that respects human dignity and autonomy. The battle is won not in the code, but in the character of the people making the decisions.
we've seen that the ethics of cybersecurity decision-making relies on balancing objective security metrics, subjective stakeholder interests, and affective or emotional perspectives, such as the need to protect a life during a ransomware attack. Since AI is increasingly being relied upon to make these complex, context-specific decisions, often in an opaque, black box manner, we have to ask, how can we ensure that algorithms are trained not just on technical efficiency or speed, but on moral courage? That's the question of our digital age, and something for you to mull over as you navigate your own professional duties and build your own systems. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the ethical dilemmas of cybersecurity. We hope this exploration gives you the insights you need to make not just the legal choice, but the right one.